Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love, an everlasting love, an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness have I drawn you, drawn you, drawn you.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 14, Admitting When We Are Wrong. And I'm going to start out today's podcast with an apology. During last week's episode, episode 13, Halloween Part 2, we were talking about occult practices, satanic practices that people do. We were talking about superstitions. And unfortunately, I, being very tired, but also having a multitude of samples of people that I know who have done things like this, that is related to what we were talking about. I mentioned some people's names, and I may have gone too far, and I insulted two people, and I'm sorry about that. But I want to make it clear that the reason I'm apologizing here is not because everything is fine between me and those people. We have issues we need to resolve, and other people still need to admit the ways that they have wronged me in the past. That's still an issue. But I want to set an example and make the first step to at least admit when I'm wrong. And we're going to be talking about that, more of that today. But let me explain why I'm apologizing. Now, it's not just because my mommy made me apologize, which is true, but I've actually had time to think about it. I've actually had a lot of time to think about it, and I started realizing something. Well, the reason that I don't like to listen to politics is because what each side does in political parties or when people take sides in war is that everybody has their side and then they try to just speak badly about the other side. Mm-hmm. But what that does, here's what I realized, is when you talk about how bad your opponent is and the people you don't like, that doesn't mean that you're good. That just means you're only saying, oh, I'm not as bad as that guy over there. That's all it is. And even though these people that I mentioned, and plenty others that I haven't mentioned, have said horrible things about me, and falsely accused me of all kinds of things that are not G-rated. But when I start using our podcast, which is supposed to be about everlasting love, and I start naming and shaming these people publicly in our podcast, then I'm being just as bad, and I'm being a hypocrite. Because then I am failing to follow the golden rule. I'm doing to others what I don't like them doing to me and that they have done unto me. But me retaliating that way that's not good. And I feel like when I'm well rested and I'm not as tired, maybe I'm able to stop myself from going that far. But I went too far last time. And what this does tell me is that I have unresolved issues with these people that I will have to speak with them privately, separately, if I'm going to speak to them at all. And it's something that I can't do alone, but I wanted to apologize for the part I played in escalating the situation, because by me just insulting people and calling them stupid, I am not helping the situation. And I admit that. I admit that I'm wrong with that. So that's the point, is we have to admit when we're wrong. And the other people may not admit the things they've done wrong to me, but if I don't set an example and admit my part in this, then they probably won't feel like it either.
Okay. Well, that's why we're going to talk today about our words and about being able to admit where we're wrong and why we need to, especially if we have a platform where we're trying to teach and minister to people about God and His Word. We have to be real careful what we say, and we have a big responsibility. And how many people that have their platforms, how many preachers, how many teachers, how many people that have these platforms use those platforms mostly to just spout off about their opinions and complain about what's going on in the world or other people. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And there's times when I'm listening to a Bible teacher and really getting something out of what they're saying until they get off on their own little tangent and go on and on about what they don't like about this and this and this shouldn't be happening and those people shouldn't do this and this is what's wrong with them. See, they detract from what God's trying to teach people when they do that. So, and we all make mistakes. We all can, in our humanness and our own weaknesses, we can all make mistakes. And it's just that, unfortunately, most of the people I've listened to that get off track like that will never apologize, will never admit when they're wrong. And that's not right. And it's dishonoring to God. And that's why I really appreciate Chastity being willing to speak up and admit when she's wrong. And I'm going to read a couple of scriptures about our words, and then we'll talk some more about this whole thing. Okay, this is just like 2 verses in Matthew 12, verses 36 through 37. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. And then in James chapter 3, it's a short chapter because the book of James is pretty short. But it's all about our words and the tongue. And it starts out by saying, my brethren, be not many masters. In some translation, it's more accurate to call them teachers, because back then the masters were the teachers. The ones they called master were the ones that were teaching, like the rabbis and so forth. So it's talking about those who have that responsibility to teach other people truths. So it says, don't try to be, don't have a whole bunch of people all trying to be a master, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. Meaning we're held responsible, and so we're the ones that are going to be held more responsible if we misspeak and say things we shouldn't say. So we need to be really careful about that. I mean, everybody should be, but if you're in a position where you're trying to teach other people about what God wants for them, and then you say things that are not helpful, you're going to be held accountable for that. So then it goes on to say, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same as a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Meaning the pilot of the ship. See, they talk kind of different, in the Middle English back then that the King James was written in. So it's talking about the captain of the ship, the one steering the ship. Even though it's a small helm, whichever way they turn, that's the way it's going to go. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. Like a spark, can eventually blaze into a larger fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Yeah. So, that's why we do have to be careful what we say, and we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to say something that we realize, oh, that was not the best thing to say. We can all get off track from what God wants us to really say. But the thing is, He knows we're going to make mistakes. He just wants us to be able to admit it, apologize, and go on. And one of the things that I want to share that I learned as a parent, because I was so badly abused as a child, I had a hard time knowing when I became a parent, okay, how do I do this and do it right? I did not want to be like my parents. I wanted to make sure I did the right things and raised my children in a loving way, but knew how to discipline them properly. And I was trying to figure out, how do I do this? Because in my mind, all I had were bad memories of being abused. And the only way I could learn how to be a good parent, I had to keep thinking, okay, in each situation, what would my parents have done in this situation? And then when I realized what it was, do the exact opposite. That was my best guide for parenting, to make sure I did the opposite, because they did a lot wrong. And that's all I had in my mind, and I didn't want to repeat what they did. The last thing I wanted to do was end up hurting my children the way I had been hurt as a child. So I had to work really hard at it, because when you've been raised that way, it doesn't come naturally. Even if you do know how you want to be, you don't know. I didn't know how to give love because I hadn't been loved right. And yet I wanted to be able to love my children, and I loved them, but I didn't know how to show it because I hadn't been shown love. So I remember the first child I had was my daughter Charity. And when she was a baby, I had to practice hugging her and showing her love, because I hadn't been hugged and loved. And I would make myself do it. I had to teach myself how to practice the things that I should have had as a child myself and didn't. And I struggled a lot, because what would happen is the parts of me that still felt really deprived and unloved from childhood, as soon as I'd try to show her love, that parts of me would feel jealous and think, well, wait a minute, how come I don't have a mother to love me? And I had to struggle with that and just keep on doing what was right. And it got easier, over time, because I just had to learn to start a total new trend as a parent. And I was trying really hard to do all the right things. And then later on, I had my adopted son, and a lot of the things he did really triggered my bad memories. So it was hard to be patient because he had a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and he would take those out on me, I guess testing me, because he hadn't been loved properly before I adopted him. So he would test me to see how much I could endure, and I would get upset. And even though I was trying not to be abusive, there were times when I reacted in such a way that, I went too far. And then what I always did, no matter what my kids did wrong, if I realized that I had also done wrong, no matter what they did, I wanted to admit my part, my mistakes, and let them know that I was sorry, that I shouldn't have acted like that. I'm sorry, that I started yelling at you. And, I think, especially Donnie, he was not used to that. And I remember one day when he really, really, really been acting up bad. And I was really angry at him. And I got very upset with him. And then I made him go to bed early. I remember that I went in there later and knelt down by his bed. And I just cried and cried, and I apologized to him. Because I wanted him to know that what I did wrong was not his fault. I wanted my kids to learn what they did wrong, that there would be consequences. But if I did wrong, that I would apologize. And so I actually would always apologize for my mistakes with my children for two reasons. First of all, I didn't want them to blame themselves for what I had done wrong, but only face what they did wrong. And I didn't want them to grow up like I did, being blamed for everything and thinking everything was my fault, that the abuse was my fault. Everything they were doing to me, they had brainwashed me to think that it was all my fault. And I didn't want to do that to my own kids. So my part had to be reckoned with, and I had to let them know I was wrong. The second reason I did it was to help myself to remember, okay, telling myself, you went too far here, watch yourself. Next time a situation like this comes up, try to pull back and not react the same way. And that was my way of teaching myself to draw the right lines and to keep myself from going too far in my reactions. So that was really important. And I remember thinking, and I've thought this all my life. Now, both my parents are dead now. But if at any point, while I was growing up or even as an adult, if at any point either one of them had actually apologized to me for the things they did to me that hurt me so much, even if they did it on their deathbed, if they did it, at any point, it would have meant everything to me to have them apologize. And I had this fantasy of, like my father, that maybe someday he would tell me he was sorry and that he loved me. So when he died, I was upset, but not because he died. I didn't miss him at all. But I thought, oh, that'll never happen now. And then my mother got meaner and meaner and crazier. And I was just relieved when she finally passed, because she never apologized either or admitted she did anything wrong. It was always my fault. And so I knew how important it would have been to me and how much easier it would have been for me to forgive them and feel better about myself if at any point they'd apologized, and they didn't do it. So I've tried to be the very parent that I wished I'd had. And then by the time that I got Chastity, first of all, she was a lot more compliant. So it was easier not to go too far in disciplining her because she just learned her lesson. Whereas my other two were a lot more stubborn and strong-willed. And like I said, the one I adopted had lots of problems that had started before I ever had him. And so anyway, after all those years of struggling with those two, and then also once I was divorced and was a single mother, I didn't have to cope with the abuse from my husband, and that made it easier for me to raise a Chastity by myself. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have a big responsibility in how we treat others. And no matter what other people do to us, we have to admit our part. And that's why what Chastity just did is the right thing to do. And when we do mess up, make mistakes, that's the thing to do, is to just admit it and move on, not to just give up, but let God continue to work through us. And we learn our lesson, and then we set a good example, like Chastity was saying, to other people. And we do have a big responsibility because God's called us to do this, and we're hoping to really reach and help people and really show God's love and the things He really wants people to know. And so when we make a mistake, we just have to say, hey, I was wrong, and go on. And I've always admired the few people who will admit that they're wrong later. I've known very few preachers that would say, hey, I thought this and I said the wrong thing about it. Now I know it's this, and they correct it. And I haven't read very many books where someone says something even in their book, and then when they write another book later, they say, I was wrong about that, and then they set it straight. But I did read that the first time I read somebody who'd written several books, when I read one of his later books, he says, I used to think this, and I wrote about that in this book, but now I understand that differently, and I don't think that's correct. And then he sets it straight, and I thought, that's the way to do it. None of us are going to get everything right. Yeah. But if we can just say, okay, I was wrong, and fix it and move on. We don't have to stop serving God. Just get back on track, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and also what you mentioned about how they'll in their next edition of their book they'll change that thing. Well, here's the thing: is computer programmers do that. Because even computer programmers, they'll talk about, well, when I designed this language this way, it was for this time, but now we changed this so that this is easier for programmers to do this. And the thing is, it's easier for them to do that with computer programming because it's not as emotionally charged. Whereas when people have been hurt and they get emotional about certain people and groups of people that hurt them, they have a much harder time admitting that they are wrong in what they say because they're still so focused on how much worse they were hurt by somebody else.
Right.
And then it becomes a thing, about who's more of a victim or who was more wrong. But that's ultimately not helpful.
Yeah, and see, that's that strife it's talking about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strife in this world where people just want to fight and argue about everything.
Yeah.
And that's what we're avoiding, just like we read in James, to watch out for the envying and strife. That's where there's every evil work. And so that's what we have to guard ourselves, not to, like you said, you're all focused on somebody that hurt you and what they did, and then we're not thinking anymore about, what we're really saying. And then we sidetrack from what God's trying to say through us. And so that's something we all need to be careful how we handle that.
Yeah. And also, let's see if I can do this without mentioning the name of the person. because I don't want to get in trouble again. But there was somebody who I did not have contact with for 23 years. And somehow this person was able to get my phone number or something like that. And they asked if they could visit me. And at the time I was living in Independence. I had my apartment and everything. Mm-hmm. And so this person, they talked to me on the phone and they visited me and they apologized for many things in the past that they had hurt me, that they had done wrong. Now, of course, I, with my poor memory of what people say, don't remember exactly what they said. But I do remember that he attempted to apologize and he looked very sad. Mm-hmm. And I remember one thing very specifically that he asked me. He said, "What would you do if you were in my position and you had hurt your children by your mistakes?" Something along those lines, close mm-hmm. to what he said. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I would probably be doing the same thing you're doing. And that's what I told him. Because even though too much time had passed and it's too late to repair the relationship, mm-hmm. I do appreciate the effort that this person at least did attempt to apologize. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, sometimes you're hoping that somebody will apologize, admit they're wrong, but then they die and they never do. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you can't go back and fix what you did, and you can't make things be as though they never were the way. You can't make it be the way it should be now. Mm-hmm. But you can at least apologize, and it doesn't really hurt anything.
Yeah. Now, that's true if the apology is genuine, and it sounds like it was in this case. Mm-hmm. But I also know people who will apologize just so they can come back and do what they want to you again.
Right.
And so you got to watch out for that with other people sometimes.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you trust that person.
Right.
You know.
That's the thing. People say, "Oh, just forgive and forget." Well, no, we're not supposed to forget because we have to learn some things. We're supposed to forgive, but there's a few things forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not the same as trust. And so if somebody continues to be abusive in any way, you don't trust them.
Yeah.
And it's not toleration. You don't tolerate somebody doing certain things to you. Mm-hmm. You set boundaries. A lot of times you have to stay away from them. Right. But yeah, that's not the same as forgiveness. But a lot of times that's an excuse. Well, just forgive that person. Yeah. So what does that mean? Let them come back and keep hurting you over and over again? No, because a lot of people will do that. They'll take advantage of that, and they're not really sorry. They say they're sorry because they want to get back in and get the benefits of being in a relationship with you.
Exactly. And it's sort of like, for example, that just because I may forgive someone, which is a hard thing even to this day to understand, that does not mean that I want that person to have my address or know where I live. Yeah. Because I don't want them to do what they did to me before, just as an example.
So, yeah, it's not the same as trust.
Yeah.
And I've had lots of people say, "Why don't you just forgive me?"
Yeah.
And I say, "I do, but I don't trust you." Trust has to be earned. That's just it. Forgiveness we can give freely, the way Jesus forgave us. Yeah. But trust has to be earned. And that means you have to prove over a long period of time that you're not going to mistreat somebody. You can't just promise and then break your promise. Mm-hmm. You can't just beg and manipulate them to let you back in their life so you can get the benefit of being around them. No, there are consequences for how we treat other people, and sometimes too much time has passed and too many opportunities have passed for things to be made completely right. But yes, that apology, a sincere apology, that's just given, with the right ideas behind it, is a good thing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should just let anybody come back into our lives, and we can't trust them necessarily. Like I said, trust has to be earned. So there is a big difference. People get it all wrong about what forgiveness is.
Yeah, because people say forgive and forget, but that's not in the Bible, is it?
No, the forget part's not in there.
No, that's just something.
Not at all. And we can't really forget
Right.
a lot of the traumatic things that have been done to us. Those things are there, and they require time and healing to recover from them.
Yeah.
But we can offer that forgiveness, and we do it partly because that frees us up from holding on to that resentment and tormenting ourselves with it. And see, part of the reason why I ended up opening up the doors to demons was because as a child I hated my father. See, and I didn't know how to just hate what he was doing, but I hated him. And that opened the door. And so even though he was doing horrible things, it's partly because I was deceived, because at the time I didn't understand that a lot of that was demons operating through him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, he's so terrible. I just hate him. I hate him. I hate him. And that opened up the door to the devil. And so I don't hate people anymore. And yet I think the way you can know if you've truly forgiven somebody, even if you don't want to be around them anymore, because it's too late for that, is if you can still wish them well. You can still, if you know they have a need, you can still pray for them. If they're in a situation, just pray that God will help them and bless them. But you don't have any obligation to let that person back into your life, because you don't have to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're foolish sometimes if you just start trusting people again when their whole history has been bad.
Yeah. And also to bring up something you said earlier, so you were talking about, as a parent, what you learned about apologizing to your kids, you realized you've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But even those of us who we can't have children in the biological sense, or even adopting, because some of us don't have either option.
Yeah.
But in a sense, all of us in some way have influence where other people look up to us as a mentor, or somebody that they look to as an example.
Right.
Like, and that might happen. It might be coworkers who see your work ethic at work, and so they learn from your example of how to work. Or it might be just friends that you play games with or something,
Mm-hmm.
but that you get to know, and they look. And so there's, even if we're not a teacher or a parent, all of us may not even realize who's watching and who's listening.
Yeah.
And so I want to be a good example for people,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes, because I feel like nobody is listening, I feel like it doesn't even matter what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stop caring and I stop trying.
Yeah.
But
See, and that's a deception of the enemy, to make you think that. Because I know after this all occurred and you realized what you did wrong, the devil was telling you, oh, you're no good at this. You shouldn't even try doing these podcasts.
that's
anymore.
right. Well, that actually.
And look, that is the devil trying to stop you, because what you're doing is good. And you do have a good ability, to influence people in the right way. You just made a mistake, and the best thing to do, just apologize and then go on and continue doing what God wants you to do.
Right, because that was how I was feeling. I was feeling like, well, why even bother?
Yeah. That was discouragement coming from the devil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then I also, even though that was how I was feeling for a long time, I also realized something else, is that this isn't just about me, see. This is also about you finally being able to say things and teach things to the people that you know.
Right.
And I'm the technical person. I'm the person who tries to set up and record and upload and edit the podcast. And so if something were to happen to me, and if I get discouraged and I give up, then that screws you up, and I don't want to do that
Right.
to you. You know, so even though, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm not feeling like it. I'm just not feeling like I want to continue. But the show must go on, and I'm the only one who can help you make this happen.
Right, and yet you're more than just a technical person. It's true, I couldn't do any of this without my technical person here. But you do contribute a lot too when you're in your right mind.
which is almost never, but
Well, we just had a rough time last time we did this, but I still think good's coming out of it, and that's what I told Chastity. I said, so we messed up, but if we talk about it this time and talk about this whole thing, God can redeem the whole thing and turn it into a really good lesson for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's about the scripture of, where it says that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So if God's called us to do this, and this is a mission from him, he's going to help work it all together for good. We just have to be willing and stay sensitive to him. And when we know we made a mistake, just admit it, learn our lesson, and move on. And that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. Amen. Preach it, mother.
Anyway, so we had a little chat with you today, and finally, Lauren is doing better. She was sick for a long time, and then she finally got her teeth pulled. And so I think that she's going to be able to be with us again real soon. And I hope so, because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going in the hospital for surgery. And then I'm going to be in rehab for a while. So there'll be a couple weeks we'll have to miss. But then Chastity's going to try to arrange us to be able to, she knows how to do a split screen or something like that. And even while I'm in rehab, I'll have my laptop with me, and she thinks she can find a way for us to continue to do our podcasts while I'm in there. So we're just going to leave it up to our technical engineer here to figure out how to do that, because we're going to continue to do what we can. So hopefully we'll have Lauren and maybe another podcast one more time before I have to go in the hospital. So there may be a couple of weeks we're not able to do it, but then, we'll come back and do this as long as God wants us to do it. So
yeah, and remember, this is episode 14, which means there's 13 previous episodes that if you haven't listened to them all, then you have plenty to listen to while you wait for us to be able to record the future ones.
go back and review some of them.
Yeah.
Because you might get something new out of it.
Yeah,
each time.
go watch the reruns.
Okay, and at least you'll get a good laugh out of some of the stuff Chastity says.
Yes. Yeah, stay tuned for future examples of Steve and Bob.
Oh, man.
The people I made up.
Yeah, that you made up again and again and again. There's always a Bob, and a lot of times there's a Steve in every example.
There's always a Bob. No matter what's happening, there's always a Bob, and sometimes he has a friend named Steve.
Okay. That's one of your trademarks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, people.
Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting